Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce, and today I have some special guests with us. Today I have David, Steven, and Dexter, and they are the creators behind a new comic book as well as a board game called The Tales of Blood Island. Gentlemen, welcome to the Horror Room.
Hi, how you doing?
Thanks for having us, Travis.
Thank you.
So tell my subscribers and my guests a little bit about Tales of Blood Island, the comic book and board game.
Well, Tales of Blood Island came about. I am a good friend of Brian Yuzna, the producer of the Reanimator film franchise. He and I worked together. I had launched the first 24/7 horror channel called Monsters HD. It no longer exists, but it launched in 2003. It was all high definition horror movies. I upgraded Brian's Reanimator films and licensed it, and I struck up a nice relationship with him and have become friends with him ever since. And I am also the representative and agent for Sam Sherman. Sam is a producer and distributor of drive-in films from the 60s and 70s. He had a company called Independent International Pictures. But Sam also started out in the business working for Jim Warren. And Jim Warren was the publisher of Famous Monsters and Eerie and Creepy. Well, Sam started out as a writer, and he did a lot of the help with advertising in the back. They had Captain Company, which sold a lot of merchandise. Well, at the same time, Sam was working for a company called Hemisphere Pictures. Hemisphere Pictures produced a lot of drive-in movie fare in the 60s, and pretty much that's when Sam was working on the marketing campaigns for what are known as the Blood Island films. And these Blood Island films featured, they were all shot in the Philippines and starting in 68. And there were about 4 total. There was one called Terrors of Man, which actually was inspired by Island of Dr. Moreau. It's about a mad doctor, but it takes place on Isla de Sangre. It's Blood Island, shot in the Philippines, made directly for the drive-in market. And then back in 68, Hemisphere made a picture with John Ashley. John Ashley, he was in all those beach party flicks with Frankie and Annette. And those were made for American International. Well, he went over to the Philippines and started working with the Hemisphere and a director named Eddie Romero. And they made these monster movies that all took place on Blood Island. And the setting featured mad doctors, weird mutants, radiation, and, just bizarre creatures. And one of those creatures was called the Chlorophyll Man. And the Chlorophyll Man he's basically a zombie. He was created by this guy named Dr. Lorca, a mad doctor who used chlorophyll to treat cancer. Well, it had other effects. He was trying to do it was really crazy. He was doing head transplants on the native population. But lo and behold, he was treating a guy named Don Ramon who had cancer, injects him with this weird, green blood serum, and it turns him into an undying monster, the Beast of Blood. And that was in a film called Mad Doctor of Blood Island. Well, it was so successful, they made a sequel. And John Ashley returned, and it had the first one, Mad Doctor of Blood Island, had Angelique Pettyjohn in it, who was in Star Trek. She played, what was her name? It was in one of, I don't know if it was The Arena or whatever, but you'd recognize her if you saw her. She was quite buxom, which sort of with the Beast and the Blood, these films actually established the 3 Bs, which is blood, breasts, and beasts. That's where these came from. Yeah. So Angelique Pettyjohn, if you ever see her in the Star Trek episode, you'd get it. But then they brought in Celeste Yarnell in the sequel, and John Ashley returned, and it was called Beast of Blood. This time out, the Beast somehow gets his head chopped off, the zombie, but the head is still alive, talking, and the body is still able to move around. And Lorca, the Mad Doctor, is he's trying to come up with some kind of super serum, I believe, prior to all that Marvel stuff. But actually, it has a lot of roots in, like H.G. Wells' H.G. Wells' Island of Dr. Moreau. And then it also, there's this whole idea of chlorophyll and a plant serum. It definitely was ahead of Swamp Thing. So we basically said to ourselves, Dex, Stephen, and I, and Brian, and a co-writer named Mark Cerulli, and we wanted to reboot this character. It sort of was a forgotten character for a long time. But really, it preceded Freddy, Jason, Michael, Leatherface. He carried an axe, and he was a zombie, just like Jason is in those Friday the 13th movies. And he's a pretty cool one. And we thought, wow, this would be great to sort of reboot. And, there's a headless zombie, which sort of played into this idea of working with Brian Yuzna, who produced those Reanimator films, and also uses a green blood serum. To think about it, the reagent in those films. So,
right.
And another irony, Brian was born in the Philippines. So the reason this comic book and board game came about was we want to do a new movie. We want to reboot the franchise. They made 4 of them, and we want to bring the Beast of Blood back. And what better way to demonstrate to a film financier or a studio than a comic book, which is basically a storyboard. So we somehow hooked up with Steven through a mutual friend, and lo and behold, we decided to do our first Kickstarter in 2021. Both Stephen and Dex, poured their blood, sweat, and tears into the Blood Island book. And lo and behold, we just finished and completed our second round of funding for the second issue of Tales of Blood Island. On top of that, we did a board game, so which is inspired by the comic book. But the real goal here is to get these comic books and the story in front of producers and financiers to help Brian and the team make a feature film to bring back the Beast.
And that's an amazing way to do it. I mean, because comic books, like you were saying, are a storyboard for a movie. And now, when it comes to the comic book and the board game, are you releasing them as a set, or can individuals purchase them separately?
What we did was, we really wanted to make these things special. They're kind of unique, and they were sort of exclusive to the Kickstarter campaign. Again, we've only done our second campaign, and this campaign was to fund the second comic book. The prototypes for the board game, they were made. We also made in 2021 a tiki mug, because these movies are set on this tropical island. There are tikis all around. So there's a tiki movement going around. It's been going around, a revival of tiki, lifestyle culture, the sort of fun of tiki mugs. And so, but this fit right into that. I had done what they call a Halloween event at the Maikai in Fort Lauderdale. Very, very fun mid-century tropical restaurant. And every October they do sort of a Halloween themed event. And we released a Beast of Blood mask in conjunction with Trick or Treat Studios. And we also, Stephen's showing it, a Beast of Blood tiki mug.
That's super cool.
Yeah, with removable head. So it's a 2-piece stacker tiki mug that holds about 12 ounces of your favorite beverage.
Oh,
4
I need one
ounces
of
in the head,
those.
8 ounces in the
I need one of
body.
those.
Yeah. And this year we also did a zombie glass because the Beast of Blood is a zombie, and it has glow in the dark and color change effects. So we like these movies. The best part of them probably is the trailer. They're unique ideas, but the fellow I represent, Sam Sherman, who's about 83 years old now, he worked on the marketing campaign. So they were very clever and fun. And if you ever see drive-in trailers from that period and the poster campaigns, that was Sam Sherman. And he went on to become a producer and a writer. And we worked with Severin Films to release all these films with new HD scans and 2K and 4K. And, Sam's films are seeing another sort of iteration after the DVD craze, the VHS craze. But we still bring them back for revivals at drive-ins and even tiki bars in the back of their parking lot. We set up an inflatable screen and we have a good time just, showing these to people and who've never maybe seen them before.
So there's definitely a resurgence right now in the horror genre of the old school monster movies.
Yeah. Well, the fact that Godzilla, right? I mean, look at Godzilla. Who would have thought a guy in a rubber suit from whatever, how many years ago, is popular and big time? Apple TV and, Legendary doing more and more movies with Warner Brothers and anime on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I think there are Toho stores. So why not the Beast of Blood, I say?
Why not? I mean, because the old school monsters are where horror originated.
That's right. That's right. But, in terms of what I've really enjoyed in the whole Kickstarter process with these and working with Brian is really working with these guys, because I'm a frustrated artist. Okay. I wish I could have done it myself. I can't do it, but I'm lucky I got Steven and I got Dex who did a comic before this that sort of fit in. So they can tell you a little bit more about it, because it does have some horror elements. And it was just it's sort of a weird coming together of people and projects and interests that sort of was, it's rewarding just to have that kind of community and get together with guys, complete strangers. I didn't know them before, now I consider them my friends and, kindred spirits in this monster game and Blood Island. So
Indeed.
Now, Dexter, I see that you're a huge video game fan. I see the Gears of War in the background, and I see some Mortal Kombat. Now, did you use any of your love for modern video games when it came to creating the idea for the comic book as well as the board game?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, most of the ideas were already preset. They were already there. Steve and I just used, what was already presented to us. But yeah, in terms of the gore and the horror, we definitely used a lot of references from video games and movies and stuff.
A lot of this and what Dex and Steven did for me and Brian is really visualize ideas and come up with pre-production art and storyboard art and concept art that we think celebrates this genre and this project. And both these guys are so talented that just lucky to have them.
Yeah. Like they were saying earlier, like getting into comic books, because Steve and I have been doing comics for like over 20 years. And, we done San Diego Comic-Con, like I was talking earlier, Baltimore and all that. Mm-hmm. I remember, Steve, like in San Diego Comic-Con, there were directors, producers just walking around looking for ideas. So that seems to be the new trend nowadays, like just getting ideas. And like Dave was saying, it's basically a storyboard of a movie or a TV show, if you will. So Steve's been working in the industry for how many years, Steve, doing storyboards? And
I've been in this business for over just about 40. working in advertising, doing commercials and stuff like that. I also did I don't know if you remember, there was T-shirts for a basketball thing called And One.
Oh, yeah.
I did all the art, and so that was my claim to fame, during the '90s. But anyway, but I always liked doing comics, and so when I worked with Dex before with Tony Waves, which was a tiki-inspired horror type of thing, it was no big leap to go from that over to Tales of Blood Island here. So
Beautiful artwork.
it was just great, because it's a combination, as David sort of pointed, it's a combination of influence, right, and it also has what he described as that's old sort of macho men's adventure crossed with horror, So you have these, like, guys fighting, well, the beast itself is iconic. When David talked about the poster for the third movie, you've probably seen it. It's a poster of a guy holding his head up like this. Okay, you just look it up, and that itself is iconic. You've never seen even Frankenstein, Dracula, in that kind of pose, and so he's kind of unique in a way. And so that's again, as like a iconic monster. He's terrific after all put in these stories. So it's really been a blast, and David working with this other writer, Mark Cerulli, they come up with these really incredible story that's kind of trying to keep it contemporary, but at the same time hit off all right, click off on all the just enough gore, just enough boobs, just enough blood to keep this whole thing looking something exciting and interesting. So.
Yeah, Stephen, I'm a marketing guy as well. Now, when it comes to, you can have the greatest idea ever. Now, what is your marketing plan? This is an amazing idea. Now, what is your marketing strategy to get this in front of the right target audience?
I think David can handle that.
Yeah, well, it's funny because, as I mentioned before, I worked at American Movie Classics, which became AMC, the home of The Walking Dead and so forth. But every year, we did something called Monster Fest, and I started that for the network. It became Fear Fest, and one of the things we target, Halloween, and we specifically structured our campaign around one of the most popular holidays. And if you can target the demo and who the demo is, it's funny because zombies, never go away. They always come back. So we just sort of, it just came together that this is a unique property. Brian Yuzna loves the concept, loves the project, and marketing to an audience that seems still wanting more zombie film. Having worked for AMC, I'm kind of tired seeing the next iteration, I hate to say this, of Walking Dead. What's nice about Blood Island and Beast of Blood, it's pretty new, because if you never saw these 4 films before, it's a whole ride and adventure back into like the 60s and 70s, and we've sort of said it. I mentioned his name before, but Eddie Romero and John Ashley were both associate producers on Apocalypse Now. Francis Ford Coppola shot Apocalypse Now in the Philippines, and Eddie Romero and John Ashley were making movies over there. They were making the Blood Island movies. So we've taken that, and if you look at the Blood Island movies and look at John Ashley's character, and you say to yourself, did Francis Ford Coppola see these movies? It's not hard, but we've taken that sort of Joseph Conrad Heart of Darkness idea and then said, hey, Apocalypse Now, Vietnam, Mad Doctors. People tried to do this idea before, and there are a couple of good comics that tap into Vietnam, but this just that's when these movies were made, during the Vietnam War era. And ironically, Eddie Romero and John Ashley, they worked on the film as a sort of scouts and associate producers. And what's also interesting about the Philippines, great mythology of monsters that I don't think they know about here in the States. So it's allowing us to expand a universe of more than just the beast of blood and zombies. We have, killer Fiji mermaids attacking, our heroes and heroines.
There you go.
Zombie warriors, and voodoo spells. We mash and mix it all up just like a tiki drink and sort of have fun with it. And we're going to show some of those cool monsters from the Philippines. There's one called, it's hard to say, but it's called the Manananggal. And the Manananggal is this sort of vampire woman, evil witch vampire thing that can separate its body, its torso from its and it flies around with intestines and guts, and it sucks out babies with its tongue. And so we're sort of re-envisioning all of these weird monsters because, frankly, Beast of Blood, he's a weird monster. That's one zombie that can't die. He's talking around with his head.
Yeah.
You don't see that in The Walking Dead. You don't see talking zombie heads. So this predates Return of the Living Dead. So there's sort of a campy fun about it, and it also predates Reanimator. Brian Usna swears he never saw these movies. I find it hard to believe, but either way, if you've never seen them, just watch the trailers. You'll get to say, what the F is that?
Well, and I grew up in the 80s, so I'm used to 80s, 70s, 80s horror flicks. And you mentioned beast, blood, and boobs, right? But it's kind of sad if you look at modern horror movie, they've taken the boobs completely out. Of horror movies. And the boobs are such a crucial part to any horror movie since the beginning of time.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, they really did this. These movies started in 67, 68 with the first one was made in 59, shot in black and white, Terrors of Man. But they had a very buxom woman named Greta Thyssen, and they really played up that angle because she was a pinup model, and I think she posed in a lot of those gentlemen's magazines of the time. And then back in 68, they made Brides of Blood, and it featured a very famous burlesque star. Her name was Beverly Powers, also known as Beverly Hills. And Beverly Hills was her stage name for a very good reason. And then they did, the next one with Angelique Pettyjohn, and I sure wish I could remember the name of the episode, but if you see her, most of these actresses also co-starred with Elvis Presley. So these girls, they made a name for themselves in Hollywood because
they were lookers.
Yeah, they were lookers. And but they were all good sports in these movies because, I got to imagine the Philippines was hot and humid, and they're probably working under very tough conditions. But these were the movies that really celebrate that. There were beasts in these movies. There weren't those Herschel Gordon Lewis like Blood Feast movies. There were no beasts in there. These were the movies that sort of started it all. And I don't think today's horror films touch it. I think it's probably the Me Too movement. I don't know, but
the whole PC culture.
I think there's a way to sort of still do it, and we are trying to do it in a way that showcases women as beautiful and powerful. And you know what? Hopefully, we'll get that message across without being, crucified. So.
But one of the cool things too is that it has like monsters in it, and like Steve and I always been monsters fans, like growing up, like Godzilla and stuff like that. And just to have all that cool stuff put together, plus all the other gore, zombies. Like it really has everything. Because I too, Travis, grew up like in the '80s and the horror, like for all the horror films during those times.
Mhm.
And I really like Steve said, this is like a dream job just to be able to work on something as cool as this with all the different stuff in it that you just grew up loving. It's really really awesome.
Also, Travis, there's a thing. The Blood Island also brings items to it. In other words, when you think of a Dracula movie, there's always like you have the wooden stake, to kill the vampire. Here, a jungle tableau. You rarely ever see jungle horror movies, but it goes beyond that. The weapons, the actions are things I've seen before. And there's these vicious looking things that it's not just the monster, in the the things that go with it. Even the tiki statues I've seen before, and the whole it's like a hey, just like in the '50s when they gave us a Creature from the Black Lagoon. It was like, wow, here's something else that's not set in Transylvania. Here's a guys that takes it in the tropics, and it has all this Filipino type of flavor to it in terms of the monsters, the weapons, the way the women look. Like it's something you haven't seen before, or needs to be explored. So I'm happy to be on board.
Yeah, I think we're just trying to celebrate something that's different, and not the typical, zombie flick or monster flick. It's very different, but it's we want it to be a time period, but it could it could be set in any time period. It's this jungle environment that Predator had it, but it's totally different because we have female characters that are powerful and have to fight back. It's not damsel in distress. I mean,
Right.
And it's not Tomb Raider video game sort of stuff. This has elements which Tomb Raider doesn't, which has real fun mythology, monsters, and it's just a mashup of everything you can imagine. And we want it that way because I grew up watching those Ray Harryhausen movies, and I couldn't wait to see the next stop motion monster. And okay, let's get through we try to keep that sort of serial adventure of like keep it coming at you. And Stephen and Dex, they've helped me sort of look at our words, but cut them down, and they just cut to the chase. And I think that's unfortunately, even as a kid, I didn't like all the dialogue and talking. So show me the good parts.
The good part, exactly.
Yeah.
I want to see like even those Friday the 13th. I want to see the guy get his head knocked off.
Yes.
And I want to see.
Forward to that.
I want to see Jason with his face off, or his mask off. I want to see all that stuff.
So the board game. So tell us a little bit about the board game, because I had a chance to see a couple of pictures. Actually, Dexter posted a couple of pictures. It looks really cool. So tell us a little bit the rules of the game.
I can tell you a little bit, and these guys can join in, and they really helped a lot because we just figured, you know what? Comic books are a great show and tell piece too, but games. The world is, you talk about video games, but there's still a world of board game players and tabletop game players.
I'm one of them.
Okay, you're one of them, huh? So we said to ourselves, well, we're still old school guys, we're still, frankly, not as, and we thought, what would be an easy stepping stone for us to do? So we basically said, how do we create sort of a springboard from the comic to a board game and capture all the elements of this world on a square mat? We have a couple of different boards. We have one that accommodates a drinking game because we got a tiki mug, We even
Nice.
made a 34 by 34 inch board of Steven's artwork.
Go back
That-
3 squares.
Yeah.
Love it.
So basically, it has most of the monsters from our comic book, at least our first, what we plan to have be 4 issues. And we do plan to make this into, what would you call it, guys? A graphic novel. We're going to combine all 4
Correct.
and make it a trade. So that's on the horizon, because you know what? To wait 2 years to get the next installment while we were tinkering around with a board game, which is what happened. That's why it's been 2 years since our first Kickstarter.
Yeah.
We were tinkering around with a board game and just trying to figure out what could we do. So it's old school. I grew up playing the Hasbro mystery games in the 60s. They came out with all the Universal monsters and they did board games of them. They were simple, sort of like Chutes and Ladders, Candyland with Universal monsters. They're worth a lot of money now, especially the creature. But we said, well, what else could we do? Well, there's 3D printing, which is a big hobby. So we used an artist named Tony Palumbo, whose dad is Boris Vallejo, who's a famous fantasy artist. And Boris, he worked on a lot of movie posters. I think everything from the second release of Barbarella to all those like Deathstalker. In fact, there was a Deathstalker Kickstarter campaign with Slash from Guns N' Roses. So everybody's doing comic books.
Yeah.
Everybody. I went to New York Comic Con. There's John Carpenter in the middle of the main floor, sitting at the table with all these comic books he's doing. So we feel we're in good company. And obviously the comic book world has gone into all these spin-off and things. As a former comic book collector, I got a little upset with all the, I couldn't keep up with all the, spin-offs, crossovers,
The Universal.
Werewolf by Night, and Marvel 2-in-1. I couldn't collect them all, which was the mindset. And so we felt with a board game, well, let's see, how do we translate it? So we just got characters. We have a limited amount in our comic, and we have all the monsters. We sort of know what they are. Let's place them on the board. And we said, why don't we have the Beast of Blood as a 3D character with removable head and various body parts that chase you around, okay? And basically, if you get hit by the beast, you got to either go back to the lagoon or you're penalized in some other way. Now, is this the only iteration of the game? Here I am complaining about Marvel spin-offs and trying to keep up with a serialized comic book. Yeah, we're going to serialize this game in some form or fashion, because that's what's nice about Kickstarter. You can experiment and you get a community to back an idea. So this isn't really made. It could be. We've had interest from companies who want, and we're exploring to take the game out. But our thing is sort of all intertwined. It's with the comic book, the barware. We even have Cabana shirts. So we're trying to reinvigorate a brand that has been dormant for over 50 years through whatever merchandise that works like a show and tell piece for fans to basically reintroduce the Beast of Blood to horror fans who may never have experienced what this is all about.
Yeah.
Well, you guys are at the right place, because majority of my subscribers and watchers are indie filmmakers, horror filmmakers. So,
that's great.
That's in the right place.
Well, the funny thing is, a lot of this, advice came from Brian Usna, who is a regular guy. He's not Hollywood. So when he decided to go to Hollywood, he wanted to make a horror film back in the 80s, and he sought out. I think he's just a guy from North Carolina, and he's a real nice guy, regular guy, and he did a couple. He did a movie with Stuart Gordon, which was Reanimator, but he also did one himself called Society. It's a weird movie, but all these like body horror films, and really Reanimator is just in and of itself. It's a comedy. It's a horror film. It's just, and you know what? That kind of sensibility, I think, is kind of missing. But Brian has it because you know what? He's not Hollywood. He's a regular independent guy who had an idea to make a horror film, and he assembled the right people to capture what he envisioned as a producer. And he's made, let's see, 4 Reanimator films. A few with Stuart Gordon, who passed a few years ago. But, you know, he's still involved in making movies. And ironically, this is the same guy who co-wrote Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So he's a clever guy, but he's a regular guy. And I also think he's got the independent spirit. So he's never gone Hollywood, even though he lives there. He's been a wealth of information and inspiration for me, and we're lucky to have him on our team.
Yeah. There's a reason his masthead.
Yeah, we're calling it Brian Using. Are we using Brian? Yeah, he's got a name. It's Brian using his Tales of Prison.
Yes.
You know, but everybody's doing it. Did John Carpenter write all these comic books coming out? No.
Put his name on there because it brings attention.
That's right. And you know what? Any advice to any indie? Don't be afraid to work with somebody because like that. You know, there are a lot of great horror producers, directors, you know, who might find comic books an inspiration. Because I'll tell you this, I produced a documentary when I was at AMC on Tales from the Crypt. It's called Tales from the Crypt, From Comic Books to Television to Film. And that's really, my uncle was a Tales from the Crypt collector as a kid. He grew up in the 50s. And those comic books were like forbidden fruit for me whenever I visited from out of town. We'd go up into the attic and say, hey, look, let's look at Uncle Charles's EC Comics, because they were gory, grisly stories. Well, guess what? Those stories and the guys who were reading them, John Carpenter, George Romero, Steven Spielberg. You get those books that, who was it who put those out? I think Dark Horse?
I think it was Dark Horse.
Yeah. They did reprints and you look at the forwards by the people who did them. R.L. Stine. R.L. Stine did the Goosebumps. That's all from the Tales from the Crypt comic books, which truly, what is our comic book called? Tales of Blood Island. So as a horror fan, those comic books meant a lot to me, and they do mean a lot to a lot of people, and especially guys like, you know, Brian, dear departed George Romero, John Carpenter. They all talked about it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So those guys who've inspired us, right? These filmmakers, they were inspired by a comic book to get into the business that they're in. So any indie filmmaker, find a guy who loves reading comics, because really, they are storyboards, you know. And,
they are, really are.
Brian, when he saw Steven's work, he said, "This guy's great. You got to get," because he's done comic books before. Brian's been involved in a couple of, I think a company he worked with did a Reanimator comic book or two. There were some unauthorized Reanimator comics he wasn't too happy about, but you know, that's the H.P. Lovecraft situation. But in the end, Brian's world and universe of H.P. Lovecraft and Herbert West is very different. And, you know, as much as anybody, you can tell it just doesn't have that same flavor, and sort of what you need is that kind of inspiration that a Brian or a John Carpenter or guys who even made lesser horror films, Fred Decker, I don't know. All these guys, they I'm sure ate up comic books just like we did as kids.
I mean, Clive Barker is probably one of the biggest filmmakers. He got a lot of his inspiration from comic books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're visual, and film and television is visual. So if you can tell a story with, and you know what? That's what these guys have helped me with. Just keep it short and simple, and maybe we'll have a bubble or, a talk bubble or, not a lot of dialogue. The writer's job on these comics, if you're writing too much, I'm out of there. I don't want to read it. I want to see the pictures. I want to see the blood, guts, and breasts too. These guys, and Steven's great at the female figure, and the coloring on these is great. So
is that right, Steven?
It's true. But
well, it's a formula, and you know what? You got to have the right mix. And I think, look, it's not easy to get an audience, especially after a 2-year hiatus with the Kickstarter campaign. But in our world, we can continue building that audience, and it only takes one film financier to say, "Yeah, I get that. You got the look. You got a lookbook. You don't have to assemble all these images or do anything with it. We've got it. It's done. We don't have to expect somebody to read a 130-page script.
There you go.
Just look at the pictures. It's Sally, Dick, and Jane, and here it is.
Right there in front of you. It's right there in front of you.
That's right.
And what's really cool about it is that I was always a Brian Usna fan, like growing up. I love the Reanimator films.
I love those.
So when I got involved with this project, just knowing that he wanted to be part of this, I was like a little fan kid,
Yeah.
It was ironic because Steve and I used to have an art studio together, and I had a poster, an image that I printed of the Beast of Blood zombie on the wall, but I had no idea who it was or what it was from, and that was up there for how many years, Stephen? And then
most of the years, you're around for like 10 years.
Yeah. So it's just how it became like full circle, and then like Steve asked me, he says, "Oh, would you want to be involved with this Beast of Blood thing?" It happened to do with the poster that you had hanging up on the studio. And then to have like Brian Usna involved, I was just mind blown. And Dave was nice enough to have a meeting one night, and we had dinner together, and I got all my Fangoria signed by him and pictures.
Nice.
I'm trying to hold back as much as I can, but I was in heaven. That was one of the best nights of my life. So just to be involved in this is really cool. So
it sounds like an amazing project. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing it. All right, so
a lot to come out. So
yeah.
All right, so this is the fun part of the interview. If you've seen my channel before, I'm going to ask all of you 2 horror questions. Are you ready?
Oh boy.
Fire away.
Okay. All right. I'm going to start off with David. David, who is your favorite all-time Universal monster character?
I'm going to have to say the Frankenstein monster. I'm going to have to. It's a tie between him and the creature. But you know what? I just love Bride of Frankenstein. It's one of my favorite films. So
I'm the same way. I love Frankenstein. He is.
Yeah.
Dexter, it's your turn.
All right.
Who's yours?
Universal monster? Or?
Yes.
Let me see. That's a tough one. I was always in the Lycan, so I would say Wolfman. Yeah, I was always into stuff like that. So, that would be mine for the Universal monsters.
And they haven't been able to make a good Wolfman movie.
Not a Wolfman. I mean, there's some movies, but
Werewolf, but not a Wolfman. Cause I think the last one was the one with Benicio del Toro, and that was a letdown.
Yeah. For some reason they just can't nail that one.
Steven?
I would have to say, if you told me what's your favorite her movie, then I would say that's Christopher Lee as Dracula. But if we're going to stick with Universal, I would have to say The Creature from the Black Lagoon. And one of the reasons is I used to have the model, when I grew up, the Aurora plastic model, and I always
Yes.
thought it was cool. I mean, it's nothing against. I love Lugosi on the steps saying, what sweet music they make, the Children of the Night, and I really like that whole gothic, shadowy look of those things. But I would have to say, push me against the wall there. I had to say the first Black Lagoon is my favorite.
Awesome. All right,
Didn't
second
we-
question.
Oh, I'm sorry to
Huh?
interrupt.
No, no, go ahead.
Didn't we meet the creature, the guy who played the creature from the Black Lagoon? Steven?
What about him? Oh, yes, I
Didn't-
did.
Yeah, he used to be at the conventions. Yeah.
Yeah,
There was
Yeah,
a-
he did.
yeah.
there was a guy. The guy I met was the guy that was in the water. He was short, but
Right.
he was under the water. The guy that you land, a color guy named Ben Chapman,
Ben
Not-
Chapman, yeah.
carrying the girl and everything.
Old school, yes.
That's a classic.
The woman
Oh,
just-
yeah.
the costume. It wasn't, when always you talk about Universal, they always talk about Jack Pierce, who did the makeup for Frankenstein, but the Black Lagoon, that whole Gilman thing was designed by a woman who was working at Universal.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, that's right. So,
Some cool
All right.
knowledge.
yeah.
That's excellent knowledge. All right,
Yeah.
final question, guys. Steven, I'm going to start off with you first.
Okay.
King Kong or Godzilla?
Oh, you know what, Travis? It always bothered me to see King at the end, and I can't even original version or the later. What's the last version? Peter Jackson version.
Yeah, Peter Jackson.
When he shot, I can't watch it. It's terrible. So I'd have to say I actually prefer Godzilla, but to quantify, because there's so many different versions of them. I would say the Godzilla from Godzilla versus King Kong. He has those larger eyes, and he looks like the model that I used to have. So anyway,
Dexter?
Well, I don't know if you can see in the back there. I'm a huge Godzilla fan, so that's an easy one for me. I'm very excited for all the new Godzilla stuff coming out, like the show coming out on Apple TV, and a -1's coming out, I think, in December. Yeah, so it's definitely Godzilla. They don't call him King of Monsters for nothing. You know? I just love Godzilla. I grew up watching it as a child too, and I just love all the movies and even all the new stuff I love. So yeah, definitely Godzilla.
And I feel like David is a King Kong fan.
Yeah, you got me. And you know what? The irony of this, I was a Godzilla fan as a kid growing up, and I had those Aurora models too. But the reason I go back to King Kong, and it's the 33 one, that I just find that film just so far out and different for its time. I mean, they were making all these documentaries and what we're calling high adventure horror with our Blood Island series, because when they were doing what they called expedition films back in the silent period, they would, these guys would make like Shodzak, and they were going out and recording, areas that no one had visited before. So they were doing documentaries. And I think this film that we're hoping to make captures some of that spirit of an unexplored prehistoric, paradise that hides something very different. And that's what King Kong was to me. It was very different. And it's still amazing that was made when it was made. You look at it now, and yeah, if you've been spoiled by digital effects, but I tinker it around with my 8mm camera doing stop motion. And what a fun feeling that was to have that kind of, oh, I made that come to life. So, as a Ray Harryhausen fan, as I mentioned before, I grew up with stop motion and loved those effects, and pretended I could be one of those animators like Willis O'Brien. But King Kong, it's just the whole world of Skull Island. We got
Right.
Blood Island. So, I just feel it's just another world that you don't really see anymore, which is this jungle horror adventure. And that's a combination. That's a winning combination to me. I like Predator. I thought it was good. I even like the new one, Prey. It's set in the northwest, but it's still the same idea. You're in this forest or this environment that it's nature, and that's a classic story: man versus nature.
Yeah.
It's King Kong.
I think I'd like to qualify my answer a little bit because I like Godzilla. I also was by the skull concept with this often map and populated haven't seen, and we tried to bring some of that into Blood Island as well. And so that's because back in the 30s, there were still corners of the world that were sort of unexplored. There wasn't any GPS, and so you had that kind of like mystery about it, and that's kind of to have. And so I guess in the best of both worlds, you can have. But they had that recent Skull Island movie. I think I saw X. I think don't they find the remnants of Godzilla at the end there, or Mothra, or something like that. And I thought, well, that was perfect. Godzilla on Skull Island.
Yeah.
Right.
Skull
I agree.
This
Well,
place that nobody knows about, and where you can unfold all this incredible stuff. You'll have a sense of wonder. Like David said, if they could sort of that idea of like, wow, what is I think that would be great.
and also what Stephen brought up, and look, I'm a Godzilla fan, so it's an inspiration to me. But these Blood Island films were an inspiration to me when I first saw them at the drive-in. I was 8 years old. I'm seeing topless women, the Beast of Blood ripping a guy's head off in Mad Dr. Blood Island. These things are like, should I be seeing this? But they were really kind of they were before Texas Chainsaw, about the same time as Night of the Living Dead. And yeah, you saw a new corpse from the behind, but it wasn't like the Blood Island boy. And then what is interesting about King Kong and Godzilla, we've combined them, but these movies did. Blood Island was impacted by the blasts of the Bikini Atoll, so it's the radiation has mutated. So our tagline and part of the idea, which I always love to describe Monsters HD, the channel I launched, was monsters, mutants, and madmen, just like blood, breasts, and beasts. Putting that all together in a world, that's what we've got, and it's a fun world because your imagination can take you anywhere with a mutation. Your imagination with mythology can take you anywhere, and the Filipino, mythology with monsters is wild. No, I'd never encountered these things before, and there's so much of this Asian influence, and a lot of these monsters are similar to ones like in Thailand, but different. So it's a whole world to explore here for the American audience, and we hope to show it and share it, and hopefully inspire people to get the next issue.
Exactly. So where can everyone find you guys at?
Well, right now our Kickstarter campaign, I have a website, but our Facebook page is Drive-in-Sanity Films, and that's on Facebook, and on Beast_O_Blood is my Instagram, where a lot of our stuff is showing. I have a website called driveinsanity.com too. These guys, I'm sure, have their own artists' website.
I'm on all the So I'm on Instagram. I'm Dexter Weeks 6975 Instagram. I'm on Twitter. That's Dexter_art at Twitter. At Dexter_art. And on Facebook as well as Dexter Weeks. You can look up and see my stuff there. So definitely check it out. All my links to my website are there as well. All my artwork. So
Awesome.
Yep. Same with me. I'm only on the only social media thing I'm on is Facebook under Steven Sestilli. So you can find my artwork and everything.
Awesome. And guys, go into the description. The link for their Kickstarter is right in there. So click on that bad boy and please get a part of this magical experience.
appreciate it.
David, Steven, Dexter, it's been a pleasure having you on. I look forward. Listen, once we get this Kickstarter over and get it live, I would love to have you guys back on.
All right.
Absolutely. Yes.
All right. And if you guys swing by the Baltimore Comic Con, please let me know. And I'll swing by and say hi.
We'll definitely hit you up.
Travis.
Awesome.
Yeah, Travis, thank you.
No problem. Well, guys, thank you for coming on to the Horror Realm. I'm Travis Bruce. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.
Take care.
Thanks.